In the world of anime, there are a variety of archetypes that everyone is familiar with after watching one or two shows. Tsundere, dense main characters, and that one emo kid that all the girls you know go crazy shipping with his best friend are all the rage in Japan. But perhaps one of the most heinous of these archetypes for the poor, unenlightened masses who refuse to watch anime on principle is the loli. Yes, that's right, my friends. I'm talking about your standard 1,000-year goddess whose wit and intellect exceed that prepubescent pure body she's trapped within. Or even just the true loli, that is, without fail, translated the most to those websites filled with tentacles and fluids we shall not name. But friends, today I'm here to tell you why this horrific, ungodly blight on the holy gospel of our Chinese cartoons doesn't ruin a good anime, at least for me. Now, what constitutes a good anime varies from one person to another, as we can see from the people who put Sakura Trick way too high on my anime list. But there are certain anime I want to talk about that I consider good shows, that just happen to have lolis as main characters. One of the anime I'm going to be talking about today is und Panzer, a show about girls waging terrestrial tank warfare against each other in a sport known as Sensha-do. While the other is Youjo Senki, which is about a little girl murdering and rampaging her way across a magic-infused alternate Earth Germany set in the time frame around World War I. Before I go into the shows themselves, I do want to mention that yes, I may be stretching the term loli a little much in your mind by referring to the titular girls of und Panzer as such, but I honestly consider the characters in that show lolis as much as any other example in anime. Whatever your definition of the term loli is, the fact is these shows are filled with young girls doing things they normally wouldn't do in our reality. Though I'd have to say it would be pretty cool if there were tank battles between all-girls schools to watch in our world. In any case, und Panzer is a fine example of a good anime not being reduced in quality because their characters are lolis, or at least small girls. And the reason for that is twofold. The first is that the characters' genders have very minimal effect on the requirements for Sensha-do, or the art of tank battles, as most of the duties required are simply battles of the mind and reflexes, as the two opposing captains deploy their forces to most effectively achieve the objective of the match. Though there is some strength needed to load the heavy shells these girls shoot at one another, there isn't anything the characters in the show do that their real-world counterparts couldn't do as easily, which makes the suspension of disbelief much easier to swallow. As a result, whether or not these cute girls are male or female has very little to do with what the anime is about, and you could reverse their genders with very few differences in how the competitions and story end up. Because at the age these girls are, there aren't that many differences between your average boy and girl anyway. Now, the second reason this anime still works despite the cast of characters is that the story itself doesn't focus on the fact that these are little girls, beyond the initial explanation of why Sensha-do exists. While this may seem like a retread of my previous point, the distinction here is one of perspective. Like I said, from the outside looking in, that is, from the viewer's perspective, the genders don't matter because the competitions would play out the same regardless. But the difference I'm talking about here is that because the world and overall narrative of the anime doesn't go out of its way to imagine the situation as something off or different, there isn't an issue with how the sport is perceived in the universe. The show plays the conceit that the characters are girls straight, and adheres to its plot consistently as a result, without veering off into sexualizing the characters just because they're lolis, or otherwise shifting away from the tank battles that make the series so great. The story doesn't make a big deal out of their genders in universe, and thus normalizes the fact without leaning too heavily on it to break that suspension of disbelief they're trying to weave. What sounds like a crazy idea in the writer's room somehow comes to fruition in a meaningful and entertaining way, because the center conceit of a show like this requires the viewer to accept what's happening in front of them, by shutting off the part of the brain that says, hey, wait a minute, at the fact that preteen girls are loading canister shells into fully working tanks and sending those same shells flying with brutal efficiency at other monstrosities shooting at them. On the opposite side of the spectrum, however, is how Youjo Senki treats its main protagonist Tanya by shoving the fact that this is a little girl killing people in your face at every opportunity. Despite the difference in approach, Youjo Senki's world still works on the outside because of the way the creators wield the main conceit of the show. Tanya is a reincarnation of a salaryman from our world, trapped in a little girl's body by a god known as Being X. While Tanya's age is brought up quite a bit throughout the show, the salaryman still follows his code of ethics exactly the way he did in his previous life. Logic above all else, and ruthless action to reach the top. What this fact means is that from the viewer's perspective, even though she's a little girl in appearance, we know she's an adult on the inside, and therefore her gender switch affected nothing in her character, or how she moves through the plot of the anime. This lack of effect is exactly what grabs the attention of those who find such a situation intriguing. One might wonder, how does a kid like Tanya, orphaned from a young age in this terrible war-torn world, survive with the wit and intellect picked up from her previous life? People find such hypotheticals intriguing because they want to compare what they would do in the situation with what happens on screen. And once again, even if Tanya was a salary woman in her previous life, shunted into a little boy's body, the anime would play out much the same, since her gender isn't really a big deal as much as her young age. Now, even if she was a little boy, the reason her gender doesn't matter in-universe is because of how lore perceives those with huge magical potential. To the country Tanya finds herself in, magical power is the most important factor in being a soldier, so the ranks of the military are filled with men and women. This makes for a much more equal playing field as long as you're intelligent, magically powerful, and can get the job done. It's a meritocracy based on qualities other than what traditional militaries would look for in our world. And this sense of perspective I'm talking about is honestly the key to enjoying anime if you don't like lolis as a trope generally. Acknowledging the fact that even though the characters in these types of shows are little girls, it doesn't really matter if the logistics of their gender don't affect what the characters are doing in any realistic fashion. And if the plot and story are consistent with the conceit set out in the beginning, there's no problem in-universe either. The beauty of anime is that you can have entirely out-there premises and character types of males, females, and whatever, without batting an eye, because anime often prides itself on being batshit insane normally. All it takes to enjoy an anime you think you might not like because of the lolis is a little less judging a book by its cover and a little more enjoying the characters of the people you follow. In und Panzer, you have the quiet, reserved character, the rich but low self-esteem character, the excitable and knowledgeable character, and so on and so forth. And none of that would really change if they were boys instead of girls. In Youjo Senki, you have the battle-crazed loli with a wit and intellect beyond her years. And her gender clearly doesn't change who she is because that's the central idea of the show's biggest draw. Despite all my explanations, it's still completely understandable why some people just can't get into anime like this. Whether because their suspension of disbelief just can't take them that extra mile, or because they just don't like looking at cute girls doing what some would consider a more masculine job. As is the case of und Panzer, which amusingly mentions in the first episode that Sencha Do is a female-only sport, a self-aware jab as any at those who can't bring themselves to see what the anime is. Tanks blasting other tanks in cool action set pieces, and general strategy. As for Youjo Senki, like I said in my previous video, some people may just find it sickening to see a little girl killing with such brutal glee. Not everyone wants to see innocence tainted with dark subjects like war, even if that innocence only exists on the surface. Plus, it's hard for some people to take a loli seriously because it's too incongruous with what's going on in the scene, no matter how well the situation is justified, which is a completely normal reaction, especially from people outside the fandom. To recap, as long as the plot remains the same as it would given different genders, then the quality of the anime remains perfectly fine, even if the characters were, say, ducks instead of little girls. To make a good anime, the narrative must remain consistent, and if the show wants you to take it seriously from the get-go, it can't bend or break those rules to offer up a scene to pander to some fetish. Just like magical systems and settings in new types of fiction, once you set down the rules, you have to follow them, or the consumer will stop caring about what's going on, since nothing really has a purpose. In the end, my recommendation for you is to watch anime for the plot. And I mean that literally, not figuratively. Though that's good sometimes too. You can definitely miss out on some good anime if you dismiss anything with lolis in it as trash, so I beg you to reconsider next time you come to that. If you can imagine different genders or races and nothing about the anime has changed, then ask yourself honestly why you don't like the show. And if it's still because of little girls, at least you spent some time thinking about it to confirm. If you want to discuss these anime, or rail against me for stretching the term loli too far, leave a comment down below or contact me at my Twitter, Tumblr, or Reddit account. And if you have suggestions for anime or subjects like this one to focus on in a future video, let me know those too. I'm always interested in trying to view anime from a different perspective I hadn't thought of before. And remember, enjoy the way you watch anime, because as long as you're having fun, that's all that really matters. I'll see you next time.